I wanted to introduce you to a good friend and local lender in our area because we work with a lot of investors and they're always looking for private money loans. This would be something non traditional outside the scope of what you may get with a bank. And I have worked with Zach and his group, New Heritage Group, before, and he has been a lifesaver for me on a personal deal of mine that I would have lost if I didn't have the ability to tap into private money mortgage. So I want to introduce you and just find out a little bit about his business and how he may be able to help you in your businesses. So, Zach, tell me about New Heritage Group.
Okay. Yep. You kind of described what we do. We call it private lending. Some people call it hard money lending. We're local in Springfield. We work sort of in this area, maybe within an hour of Springfield, so we don't really go outside of that. One of the major requirements for us is it has to be for it's an investment loan. So we can't lend if it's an owner occupant and they want to move into the home. We cannot do that. So investment purposes only. But outside of that, we have a ton of flexibility. I mean, we can be very creative. We do not have the requirements that your normal lending or loan officer has. We make decisions right here. We can fund deals within a couple days. We make decisions within a couple hours. So it's just very flexible financing. We can lend on new development packages, single family homes, multifamily, commercial, real estate. So yeah, just kind of a flexible way. And we make decisions here, which is really nice.
So, tell me about a situation where, let's say, they're a realtor or a young investor and they have identified a property that there is some serious upside.
Mhm.
So, this person is like, oh my gosh, I wish I could do this myself, but I don't have the capital,
Mhm.
but there's massive upside to this. And how much money do they have to bring out of their own personal pocket if there's a huge upside on the deal?
Well, our goal generally is to make it as easy on the borrower as possible, but obviously we have to hedge, the downside for us as a company. And so in this example, if it's a great deal, generally, as long as I agree, we're on the same page, right? And there's a good exit strategy and we discuss that. Normally they can come to closing with no money. We'll fund the full amount, and then if there's maybe some construction that needs to be done, we can fund that generally too. If it's a mediocre deal, so it just really depends on the deal. But that's also what's nice about the way that we work is we have the freedom to like sit right here and talk about it and figure it out pretty quickly, as opposed to a traditional lender where it's pretty black and white.
Mhm.
But most of our underwriting is based on the property, so the borrower, it isn't as there's not as much of an emphasis on the borrower's finances. So the property is what we're looking at mainly.
Right. And so you have so much experience in flipping homes. So when a borrower comes and sits down with you and they've got their spreadsheet of
Mhm.
what they think that flip property is going to cost,
Mhm.
talk to me about that. Do you ever
Mhm.
have people come to you and you're like, whoa, your numbers are way off? And
Mhm.
how do you identify if they're truly figuring out if this is a good deal or if they've counted their costs?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that is part of it. Generally, the first step is somebody finds a property. They go to our website, which is nhgproperties.com/capital, and you can apply for your loan. And it asks for all of the normal information plus photos of the property, scope of work, budget, just all the general questions. Once it's submitted, it comes to me. I'm able to look it all over and then call the borrower pretty quickly. But yeah, in that process, you can usually tell if the budget makes sense or not, and sometimes it doesn't, and that's okay. But that's where we have the conversation about like, okay, let's does this still make sense? What's the exit strategy? We have to agree on an exit strategy, make sure it makes sense. The values line up, the construction budget lines up, and then there's still the X factor of like, can they actually complete it, right? Like,
Mhm.
so a lot of our borrowers we've worked with multiple times, so we build trust. And if it's a new borrower, we have to factor that in too. Like we've never worked with them. So we need to like, we need to date a little bit before we can so anyway, all that to say, yeah, the budget, sometimes it's very on point, sometimes it's not, but it's usually pretty easy to identify. Usually
Mhm.
it's the timeline that's really off. It's like
Yes.
I can get it done and sold in 3 months. It ends up being 6 months. So we have that discussion a lot.
What is your ideal time window for the short term finance that you offer?
In terms of how long our Our average loan
Yeah.
is 4 months.
Okay.
So we do charge a higher interest rate, right? Our fees are a little bit higher. We're not the least expensive option.
Mhm.
We serve a specific purpose, and that purpose is generally people want to use the money for a short period of time. We can do up to 12 months, but generally it's 4 months. Most of the time, it's an investor that's found an opportunity and it needs to close quickly for whatever the reason is. There's a lot of reasons. And a traditional bank cannot do that within 30 or 45 days. So that's where we step in. We generally help our borrowers get a better price because we can close quickly. Like I said, we can close in 2 days or one day if we can get the title work done. So there's really not any lenders that can do that. And so being able to offer that to the borrowers allows them to get a better price and be more opportunistic. And so, yeah, our average loan is 4 months. But like I said, our interest rate's higher, our fees are higher, but we are very flexible. And over the course of a 4 month loan, is it costing you a little bit more? Yeah, but it would cost you more not to be able to capitalize on the deals. And I think based on our loan volume, like it's obvious that borrowers agree. Like it's worth the cost.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the reality is sometimes you get a good deal that has presented itself to you and it may be off market, and it is either, you act on it or you're going to lose this opportunity. And if there's an opportunity there to make 50 grand on a deal, why would you pass it up for the interest that you're going to pay or the fees that you're going to pay if you know you have the ability to get it done? What do you think is probably the biggest hurdle for an investor that's getting started,
Mm-hmm.
other than the financing?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, you know, finding deals that make sense is challenging.
Mm-hmm.
It's always been challenging and it probably always will be. I would say that's probably the hardest thing is finding a deal that makes enough sense. And then the other thing is maybe just the confidence to actually do it, like pull the trigger and take the risk. We lend the money, but you sign on the dotted line, right? So there is risk. I think that that's where we can also help. A lot of our borrowers are, maybe they're first time flipper or a wholesaler, or they want to buy and hold, like whatever it is. I think we can offer some experience and a second opinion and some strategy to help build their confidence as to whether or not they should move forward with it. Like we're not there through the whole thing. We're not their advisor, but we can at least on the front end help direct them in a good direction. And so, yeah, I would say finding deals that make sense, whether it's a single family or a multifamily or a package commercial, like finding a good deal is challenging, and then just having the confidence to execute it.
Mm-hmm. What would you say is some homework that somebody can
Mm-hmm.
do in advance? So while they're searching for deals,
Mm-hmm.
right? What are they needing to do and put into place so that when they spot the deal, they know that it's a deal?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. If you don't know what a good deal is, then you could be looking at one and not know it. So I think just studying the market, like looking at homes for sale, looking at opportunity, like physically looking at opportunities, maybe connect with you to have, maybe you can have them find them deals that make sense and explain to them like here's why it makes sense. They've got to learn. You have to learn the market.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, like you said, I mean, if you can't identify what a good deal is, then you know.
Right.
So having an advisor, somebody to help them,
Mm-hmm.
but also on their own, just getting on the internet, looking at deals, looking at flips,
Mm-hmm.
connecting with other investors locally, going to RIA groups, and
Mm-hmm.
really kind of digging into that community and learning. There's plenty of opportunity there.
Yeah. I think for me, the biggest struggle has been contractors.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I may spot a deal and have like, okay, I can make this happen. But then the availability, the good contractors are going to be booked up.
Yeah.
They're not going to be available at a whim.
Yeah.
And they may not have time for you for multiple months. So that is something you really have to think about is, do I have multiple contractor options that could act quickly for me on a deal? How do you screen your contractors when you're doing a flip?
Yeah, I mean, I use social media a lot for when I need something, a resource of any sort. Contractors, I do the same thing. I ask my network for recommendations, and then depending on who makes the recommendation. That tells me one thing, right? So that filters itself. And then, again, they tag the person. You can look at the person's Facebook. You get kind of an idea, and then you can see who that they know. And then every step of that builds confidence in, okay, maybe they could work, maybe they can't. Mm-hmm. And then obviously a face-to-face or a phone call, mm-hmm. talk about experience. Who have you worked for recently? Ask for recommendations. It really doesn't take that much time. It's just, you just got to get it done, right? Mm-hmm. But you usually have a pretty good idea. Like, is it likely that this person's going to work out? And then if it does, get them in there on a job and see how they do. I mean,
yeah,
it's all you can do. But when you find good ones, treat them well and pay them well. Mm-hmm. Be nice to them and keep them around as long as you can.
For sure.
Because they're really important.
So would it be wise for somebody to say, okay, if I'm really going to do this and I'm looking at identifying my property, and I've given myself a 4 to 6 month window to find my first flip, right now I should start interviewing and accumulating my list of possible contractors and subcontractors?
Yeah, it wouldn't hurt. Yeah. I mean, it wouldn't hurt. I kind of take the approach, like, if you can't find a good deal, then literally nothing else matters. So you want to be thinking about your contractors, and you're maybe having a conversation with us about financing, mm-hmm. and these important people along the way, right? I get that, but find the deal. Like, focus on finding deals. The money will show up, mm-hmm. the contractors will show up, everything else will work itself out, mm-hmm. But yeah.
So let's say somebody finds a fixer-upper. Mm-hmm. It needs a lot of work, and they're pretty confident on how much money they have to put into the property. Mm-hmm. And then let's say I help them and say, okay, if you do what you say you're going to do to this property, and you're using the materials that we've talked about, and it's a good quality job, I can tell you probably what your exit sales amount is going to be. Mm-hmm. What percentage do you like to see of cushion in there, mm-hmm. to be able to say, yeah, I'm willing to lend 100% on this project because I see X cushion? Is that a thing?
Yeah. So the way that our company works is we can lend up to 70% of the after repair value. Okay. So literally, I mean, if you get it for 50% of the after repair value, then you've got a 20% to play with. The challenge there is how realistic is the ARV, the after repair value. We as the lender are not going to be as optimistic generally as the borrower. Like, examples like, they think this house is going to sell for, $285 all day long. Okay, I get that. We might feel like it's going to sell for $250. We're going to err on the side of, like, conservative, mm-hmm. But generally we find sort of a happy medium that's fair. And then literally 70% of that is what we're willing to go up to. So the better deal that the borrower gets, the more money they have to play with in terms of construction. Mm-hmm. So it's very easy, just 70% of ARV.
Yeah.
So that can give or take a little bit depending on, their opinion of the ARV and my opinion.
Mm-hmm. So when he says they're easy to work with, they're very easy to work with. The deal, I had this deal show up in my lap. It was off market. It needed to close quick. It was a duplex. It had tenants in it. And there was an end buyer that was going to be buying this property, but he was qualified for a bank. He couldn't close on it because he was using FHA financing to buy this property, and there's a seasoning requirement for FHA loans, so they can't have sold in the last 3 months. So I stepped in as an investor, bought the property using money from Zach, closed on it, and we were able to, like, he just showed up at the title company, signed some paperwork with me, and did it. And then 3 months later, my borrower was able to buy this property from me and loves it, is doing really well, by the way.
Yeah, it's a good deal too.
It
was like something you don't want to let go.
Yeah. So he has put a bunch of sweat equity into the property.
Yeah, awesome.
It got a great tenant on one side, and he lives on the other side, and he's house hacking and smart. Super happy. But I would have not had the ability to offer that deal if it had not been for knowing about resources like Zach. Yeah. So I would highly encourage everyone to look up New Heritage Group. Yep. And what's your website again?
It is nhgproperties.com/capital for our lending, for our private lending. So
Perfect.
Yeah.
And then if you want me to run numbers for you on investment properties, let me know. And the two of us together would love to help you make your investment dreams come true.